My name is Brother Patch. I'm an award-winning writer, a published cartoonist, and a hypersigilist. Now, I know I can't be the only person to ever use the phrase hypersigilist, but I can't find it anywhere on the internet being used. So if you don't know what a hypersigilist is someone who makes hypersigils. What's a hypersigil? A hypersigil is a narrative model of the world created to cause changes in consciousness. That's kind of my new short layman's definition. Why make changes in your consciousness? Because when you change your consciousness, the things you're conscious of, it changes your awareness. It changes your way of interacting with the world. It changes the way the world interacts with you, and you ultimately make positive changes to your life. And so that is the point of making hypersigils. The hypersigil I create is a webcomic called Monster Truck. And if you're interested in reading Monster Truck, you can do so for free at the link in the description of the video here. In this video, I want to tell you one of the things that I think is most important to creating an effective, and that's the important part, effective hypersigil. As I've been creating them, I've discovered several things that I think make hypersigils especially effective. I think this may be one of the most important, if not the most important. Your hypersigil needs to be a narrative. Partly because if it's not a narrative, then it's not a hypersigil, it's just a sigil. So a sigil is an image that represents something else, like a stylized metaphor, a visual metaphor. But a hypersigil is when you take that image and you narrativize it, you turn it into a story. So you create a story that's a metaphor, a story that represents something else, specifically that represents a change occurring. Your story essentially becomes a metaphorical representation of cause and effect. Now, I used to teach a comic book creation course at a local school, and one of the things I did in this course was I really drove home to the kids how important it was to understand stories, like how to tell a story. If these kids are going to make a comic, it's got to be about something, and you don't want it just to be a series of pretty pictures that don't mean anything. So I taught them how to tell a story. And because these were younger kids, I needed this to be a really simple explanation. And so I'm going to give you the simplest explanation I have for telling a story. Here it is. It's 3 parts. Things are one way, something happens, things are a new way. That's storytelling in 3 simple steps. And I obviously didn't create this. This is Aristotelian storytelling. You always hear about 3-act structure. That's what that is. That's 3-act structure. And you see this expressed a lot of places besides Aristotle. I got into storytelling because of the love I had for Joseph Campbell and discovering his hero's journey. And a lot of people think the hero's journey is about how to tell stories, and it's not, but it still can give us some valuable, interesting information about storytelling. And Campbell says the nuclear unit of the hero's journey, meaning the smallest possible expression of the hero's journey, is this 3-act structure. He calls it departure, initiation, return. That's basically Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. That's basically things are one way, something happens, things are a new way. And so internalizing, learning that 3-act structure, learning to recognize it, learning to see it, learning to express it for yourself is how you become a natural storyteller. You might think then to create a hypersigil, you just do a 3-part story of you getting the thing that you're after. But that's not it. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a psychologist. These are just theories that I'm working on myself in a very ultimately non-scientific way. But my theory is, my feeling is that for a hypersigil to work, there has to be a very certain engagement with the unconscious mind. And part of this goes back to a past video where I talk about Jung's transcendent function and its similarities, I feel, to hypersigils. And so if you need the story to connect with your unconscious mind, think about dreams you have. Dreams are very rarely straightforward point A to point B, but they're usually kind of unusual circumstances. And from a Jungian perspective, these unusual circumstances are symbols. They're metaphors that represent something else in life. And so ultimately, the story you tell doesn't need to be concretely about what you're trying to accomplish, but it needs to be a metaphor, or it needs to represent what you're trying to accomplish. So if you decide you need a significant other in your life, then the metaphor, the hyper sigil, doesn't become a story about you specifically getting a significant other, but you create a stand-in symbol for that happening, and you break that symbol into the 3-act structure, and that is a hyper sigil. So that's my theory, that narrative and storytelling play a crucial role in distinguishing, first of all, a hyper sigil from just a regular sigil, but also in making the hyper sigil effective. Why is narrative so important? Well, I've been looking at, and I will talk more in the future, the work of a neuroscientist named Paul J. Zak, and his exploration of what happens when we read a story, and how we become first-person participants in the stories we read, and the changes they make in our minds and our consciousness after we encounter these stories. I will talk more about this after I have continued to research it. But at any rate, that's I think your hyper sigil ultimately benefits on a great level from being a narrative. So thank you guys for watching. More to come.